Welcome back to Connected Conversations. I'm your host, Adriane Handy. Today, we continue the immigration mini-series with the moment everything changed. Before we begin, I want to remind you, this is not a political argument. It's not an indictment. It's not even a call to action. This is the lived experience of one person who believed in the system and then experienced it from the inside. He asked for this story to be shared, not to provoke, not to persuade, but to offer a firsthand understanding of what detention can actually look like. Nothing here is exaggerated. Nothing is dramatized. This is simply what happened. In the last episode, we ended with an ordinary day, a life in motion, a future assumed. Today is where that continuity broke. Not loudly, not in a way that announces itself as life-changing in the moment, but in a way that, once it happens, divides time into two parts: before and after. The day everything changed began at the airport. He and his wife were returning to the United States after visiting his home country, a trip they had taken many times before. There was no fear attached to that, no sense of risk. This was familiar. Vacation. Family. Memories being made. And then return home. Normal. He felt safe. That matters. He felt safe. He had traveled this route before, gone through customs before, answered the same questions before. He believed in the system. He believed in enforcement. He believed in process. He supported detaining people who posed real danger, violent criminals. He did not see himself as someone at risk. In his mind, he had done everything correctly. The flight landed. Customs, lines, routine questions, nothing unusual. Until there was a shift in tone, a secondary request. "Step this way, sir." Still not alarming. He had experienced secondary screening before. More questions, document verification, then release. That's how it had always gone before. But this time, it didn't move towards release. The questions extended. The tone changed. And slowly, something began to register. This isn't resolving like it has before. He had no idea yet what the real issue was, only that something from his past, something more than 20 years old, had been flagged for review. Not something recent, not something he had been actively dealing with, something distant that he knew had long been settled appropriately, legally. At first, it still didn't feel catastrophic. It felt procedural, something that would be clarified, resolved. He turned to his wife and said calmly, "Go ahead to the gate. I'll meet you there." There was no fear in that sentence, no urgency. She walked towards the gate. He stepped aside. And that was the last normal moment. This time, the process didn't resolve. It continued. Belongings were taken. Movement was directed. Waiting replaced explanation. Eventually, instruction replaced expectation. He was told he would remain detained. He was not allowed to call his wife. He was not allowed to tell her what was happening. From her perspective, he simply disappeared. One moment, he was delayed. The next, he never arrived. No boarding, no message, no explanation. Just absence. He was taken to a holding area outside the airport, placed in a cell, alone. The explanation was minimal. Something from decades earlier would need to be reviewed by a judge. No timeline given, no clarity on when that would happen. The room was cold. No bed, no bench, just a concrete floor. Fluorescent lights stayed on constant. Hours passed, no meals, no access to his medication. Without windows, without natural light, even time begins to blur. He tried to track it through his body. Hunger, fatigue, the ache of sitting on concrete. At first, he believed this would clear up. This was clearly a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that would be corrected quickly. He thought he'd be able to make a call. But as time passed without explanation, that belief began to shift. Not suddenly, but quietly. There's a moment when the mind stops expecting resolution and begins bracing for duration. He felt that. I felt his whole body shift as he shared this part of his story. He had believed stories about detention facilities were exaggerated, that conditions were overstated, that the system worked as it was intended to. But he experienced detention himself. And until he experienced detention himself, not because there was overt cruelty going on, but because confinement feels different from the inside than it does from a distance. Distance allows assumptions. Experience removes assumptions. Sometime during the night, he was moved. Not released, not put before a judge, just moved. Restrained hands and feet, placed on a bus without heat, transported for hours without knowing where he was going. He was taken to a facility designated for immigration detainees. No timeline given, no clear outcome, no call home. Just movement from one unknown place to another. Before that day, travel felt normal. After that day, it didn't. When his wife waited at the gate, she didn't know she was waiting for someone who would never arrive. And when he sat in that cell, he didn't know how long waiting would end up lasting. That was the day everything stopped. Not with noise, not with drama, but with a quiet separation that neither of them expected. What happened next wasn't just about where he was taken. It was about what it feels like to be inside a system you no longer control. In the next episode, we step inside that experience. Not from policy, not from headlines, but from a human perspective. Thank you for listening with openness. I'll meet you in the next episode.